You know that person who suddenly disappears? They stop replying. They cancel plans. They leave messages sitting there for days. And sometimes they vanish from everyone, even the people they genuinely love. Everyone assumes the same thing. They don't care. They're ignoring me. They're being distant. But sometimes none of that is true. They're not trying to get away from you. They're trying to recover from everything. And if you've ever disappeared when life became too much only to feel guilty about it later, this video might explain something about yourself you've never been able to put into words. Because for some people, overwhelm doesn't look like panic. It looks like silence. It looks like unanswered texts, a closed bedroom door, a canceled Friday night, a phone placed face down because even seeing another notification feels like one more thing your brain has to carry. And the strangest part is that you might actually want to respond. You see the message. You think, I'll answer in a minute. Then an hour passes. Then 6 hours. Then tomorrow. Now enough time has passed that replying feels awkward. So you tell yourself, I'll respond when I have more energy. But somehow, the longer you wait, the harder it becomes. And suddenly, you're not just overwhelmed. You're overwhelmed and guilty. So why does this happen? To understand it, we need to stop thinking about social interaction as something that costs nothing. Because every interaction requires something from your brain. Tension, interpretation, decision-making, emotional regulation. Even a simple text message can create a tiny list of decisions. What should I say? How should I say it? Do I sound rude? Should I ask them something back? What if they want to keep talking? Normally, those decisions are almost invisible. But when your mental bandwidth is already full, even tiny decisions can start feeling strangely heavy. Imagine your brain has 20 tabs open. Work, money, family, deadlines, something embarrassing you said yesterday, the thing you forgot to do, the email you haven't answered, the appointment you need to schedule, the conversation you know you should have. Then your phone lights up. Hey, how are you? On a good day, that message feels harmless. On an overwhelmed day, your brain sees tab number 21. And this is where people misunderstand withdrawal. From the outside, it looks like rejection. From the inside, it can feel more like resource management. You're not thinking, I don't want this person in my life. You're thinking, I don't have anything left to give right now. That distinction matters. Because when people become mentally overloaded, the brain naturally begins prioritizing. What absolutely needs my attention? What can wait? What requires emotional energy? What can I remove? And unfortunately, social connection can sometimes land in the category of, I care about this, but I cannot handle it right now. This is especially common when you're the kind of person who doesn't know how to interact halfway. You don't just send, LOL yeah. You think about the response. You notice the tone. You wonder how the other person is doing. You feel obligated to be present. So when you don't have the energy to be genuinely present, you sometimes choose not to show up at all. And ironically, the people you care about most may be the people you avoid the longest. Not because they matter less, sometimes because they matter more. A stranger gets a quick response because the interaction costs almost nothing. But someone you love, that conversation deserves attention. And if you don't have attention available, you postpone it. I'll call them when I feel better. I'll answer when I can actually talk. I'll explain everything this weekend. But life keeps moving. And now something else enters the picture. Shame. You look at the message again. 3 days ago. Now you think, I can't just reply normally. I need to explain why I disappeared. That explanation requires even more emotional energy. So you wait again. And this creates one of the most frustrating cycles of social withdrawal. Overwhelm creates avoidance. Avoidance creates guilt. Guilt creates more overwhelm. And more overwhelm creates more avoidance. The original message might have required 30 seconds. 5 days later, it feels like an emotional project. If you've experienced this, you probably know the next part too. Eventually somebody asks, are you mad at me? And now you feel even worse. Because you weren't angry. You were exhausted. But your exhaustion accidentally became someone else's rejection. And this is where understanding the psychology behind disappearing does not mean pretending it never affects other people. Your need for space can be completely legitimate, and someone else can still feel hurt when you vanish without explanation. Both can be true. That's important, because there's a difference between solitude and disconnection. Healthy solitude says, I need some time to recover. Chronic withdrawal says, I can only feel safe when nobody can reach me. Those are not the same thing. Being alone can be incredibly restorative. There's no performance, no facial expressions to interpret, no conversation to maintain, no immediate expectation to respond. Nobody needs an answer. For a few hours, you belong completely to yourself. That can feel like relief. But relief can become a trap if disappearing becomes the only way you know how to regulate yourself. Because eventually, your brain can start learning. Overwhelmed? Disappear. Conflict? Disappear. Too many expectations? Disappear. Someone needs something emotionally complicated? Disappear. And every time withdrawal gives you immediate relief, the behavior becomes easier to repeat. The problem is that what feels good in the short term can become lonely in the long term. You may eventually look around and realize something painful. Nobody is checking on you anymore. Not because nobody cared, but because people learned to give you the distance you kept asking for. This is why the goal isn't to force yourself to become endlessly available. It's to learn how to take space without destroying connection. And sometimes that requires only one sentence. Hey, I'm really overwhelmed right now. I'm not ignoring you. I just need a little time to reset. That's it. You don't need to explain your childhood. You don't need to describe every problem in your life. You don't need to promise exactly when you'll feel normal again. You're simply giving the other person information, because silence creates uncertainty. And when humans don't have information, we create explanations. They're mad at me. They don't care anymore. I did something wrong. They're avoiding me. A 10-second message can prevent somebody from spending 3 days inventing a story about your silence. And there's another skill that matters just as much. Stop waiting until you're completely depleted before taking space. A lot of people who disappear have the same pattern. They say yes too long. They answer every message. They accept every invitation. They listen to everybody's problems. They keep showing up, and showing up, and showing up, until suddenly, they can't. Then they disappear for 4 days. That isn't really balance. That's emotional binging and fasting. You give everyone unlimited access, then shut the entire world out because there's nothing left. A healthier pattern is smaller boundaries earlier. Maybe you don't answer immediately. Maybe you say no to one invitation. Maybe you take one quiet evening before you desperately need 3. Maybe you stop treating every notification like a summons. Maybe you learn to say, I'd love to talk, but I don't have the energy tonight. That sentence might feel selfish if you're used to always being available. But boundaries often feel selfish to people who only create them after they're already exhausted. And here's another question worth asking. When you disappear, what are you actually recovering from? Is it people? Or is it the version of yourself you become around people? Because sometimes social interaction isn't exhausting because you hate being social. It's exhausting because you're constantly monitoring yourself. Am I talking too much? Am I being awkward? Do they like me? Was that joke weird? Should I say something? Am I being too quiet? Does this person seem bored? Now imagine doing that for 3 hours. Of course you need to recover. You weren't just having dinner. You were running a live performance while simultaneously reviewing the audience reaction. For some people, learning to disappear less has nothing to do with becoming more social. It means becoming more comfortable being imperfect around other people. Not every silence needs filling. Not every person needs impressing. Not every awkward moment needs fixing. Not everyone needs the most polished version of you. And when relationships begin requiring less performance, they often require less recovery too. The safest relationships are usually the ones where you can be quiet without explaining yourself. Where you can say, I'm tired today, and nobody takes it personally. Where you don't have to entertain. Where you don't have to constantly prove that you care. You can simply exist next to someone. Those relationships don't drain your battery in the same way. They may actually help recharge it. And that leads to one of the biggest misconceptions about people who disappear. They don't necessarily want to be alone forever. Often, they want connection that doesn't feel like another responsibility. They want someone who doesn't panic when they need space. Someone who doesn't demand immediate access to every emotion. Someone who understands that silence isn't automatically rejection. But that understanding has to work both ways. If you want people to respect your need for space, you also have to respect their need for clarity. You cannot expect someone to magically know whether your silence means, I'm overwhelmed, I'm angry, I'm done with this relationship, or I forgot to respond. Communication doesn't have to be long. It just has to be enough. And maybe this is the part you need to hear most. If you disappear when you're overwhelmed, that doesn't automatically make you cold. It doesn't mean a bad friend. It doesn't mean you secretly hate everyone. Sometimes your nervous system simply reaches a point where reducing input feels like the fastest way to breathe again. But understanding why you do something isn't the same as being trapped by it. You can learn another way. You can take space before you collapse. You can tell people you need time. You can stop giving everyone unlimited access to your attention. You can build relationships where being quiet is allowed. And you can come back before guilt convinces you that you've been gone too long. Because the longer you disappear, the easier it becomes to believe something that isn't true. Nobody needs me anyway. But look carefully. Sometimes people stopped reaching out because they thought that's what you wanted. Sometimes they were trying to respect your silence. Sometimes they had no idea you were sitting there hoping somebody would notice. That's the tragedy of withdrawal. Two people can care about each other while both sitting in silence, because each one thinks the other wants distance. So the next time you feel yourself wanting to disappear from everyone, don't immediately fight the feeling. Ask what it's trying to tell you. Am I overstimulated? Am I emotionally exhausted? Have I been saying yes when I wanted to say no? Am I avoiding one difficult conversation by avoiding everyone? Do I actually need solitude? Or do I need support that feels safe? Then give yourself the space you need. But if there are people you care about, leave a light on. Send the message. I'm overwhelmed right now. I might be quiet for a bit. It's not you. And then rest. Because maybe healing isn't learning to never disappear again. Maybe it's learning that you can step away without having to vanish. You can protect your peace without making people guess whether they still matter. You can need solitude and still stay connected. You can love people deeply and still need time when nobody needs anything from you. And most importantly, you don't completely empty before you're allowed to rest. So if you've ever disappeared when life became too much, tell me in the comments. When you pull away, what are you usually trying to recover from? And if you want more videos about the psychology behind the things we feel but rarely know how to explain, subscribe to True Persona. Sometimes understanding yourself doesn't mean forcing yourself to change. Sometimes it means finally recognizing what your behavior has been trying to tell you.